What do you think, reflecting on your career, is the most high pressure situation you felt?
Anytime that you're fighting for that number one spot, that honestly was the downfall for me. I hadn't fully broken until I won the belt. That was a big cracking point for me. I was drinking distilled water 72 hours before a fight. Years and years and years of underfueling and deprivation. And then it came back around to really slap me upside the head. We didn't get pregnant, and then we did conceive, and the baby lost a heartbeat at 8.2 weeks. It was the biggest gut punch, but it also woke me up to the fact that still I had neglected myself.
Miesha, welcome. I'm very curious to know how you were feeling recently watching the Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey fight. What was present for you? Was there any part of you that was like, I wish I was still having this scrap?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially the opportunity to fight Gina because, she was an instrumental part of me getting into, or not starting fighting, but she was the first female that I saw somewhere I wanted to be, that also resonated with me, the way that she carried herself, the way that she was feminine. Because you got to think, I started fighting in 2005. So
2005, wow, yeah.
So I think I first saw Gina around 2008, and she was fighting for Strikeforce, and I was like, wow, like that's a real woman right there. Yeah. And then I found myself in a room with her after I had signed to Strikeforce, and she was just so sweet, so genuine, so nice to everyone in the room, and just so beautiful. I mean, just a gorgeous person inside and out. And I was like, that's what I want to aspire to be. So I think seeing her get back in there one more time, I had a feeling it was going to go the way that it went because she'd been out for so long. And I think her biggest battle was losing all that weight. Yeah, and I know how incredibly skilled and talented Ronda is, having been in there twice with her myself.
Safe to say you know that better than most.
I know that one, and I said, well, this is a one-sided fight, but it's a win for Gina no matter what, because she's getting her quality of life back. She's doing something brave and courageous. I think it's more courageous to do what she did, knowing who she was going up against and knowing the odds. And, truthfully, I'm sure she wanted to win. I'm sure she believed she could win. But the reality was that the odds were completely stacked against her, and she still stepped up. She still did it. And that's what I think I've always admired about Gina when she fought Cyborg.
Yeah.
So I was just happy to see her get back in there and do that. But of course, I would have loved the opportunity for it to be myself. But I feel that way about a lot of fights and opportunities. And I think that's what keeps me inspired to achieve my own greatness, is like recognizing the greatness in someone else and saying, I want to make sure I'm on that level. I want to compete there. I want to be there. I want to get there. Yes. That's been my whole sort of model through my whole career.
Yeah. When did the competitive spirit fill you? Because that's what it is, right? Even that little itch of watching from the couch going like, if I was back in there again, knowing you're in a slightly different chapter now. Have you always been competitive? I know you had a history growing up in wrestling, I believe, right? Where did the competitive bug bite you?
I would say, that's a really good question, because I think it depends on how you define competitive. I think most people think of competitive as, I want to win. And that didn't bite me until far later in my career. I would say after I signed with Strikeforce, so maybe 2009, that I started to get a little bit like, winning is more important, more on the line, more as we're building. I had my first fight in 2008 with Strikeforce, but I think I was growing into that, and I feel like it started to become more and more important to win. But if we are going to redefine competitive as challenging myself to be the best version of me, I would say that hit me around high school. Yeah, near the very end of middle school. It's funny, I remember being in my classes and in middle school. So yeah, maybe even a little prior to high school. And sitting there, and we would have like a timed race for PE. And I knew it was coming up that day, and I would just try to conserve all of my energy. I just so badly wanted to beat my time. And so I think I was always kind of competing against myself, showing up in the best ways in school. And I played in bands. And I remember I was, we played, I played the flute and the saxophone. And I remember I was like 13 out of 16 chairs of the flautists. And I just didn't really care. And I was, wouldn't really put myself. And then one day I looked at the first seat and her name was Kui Kim. She was from Korea and she didn't speak very good English, but man, she was amazing. And I said, I want to be as amazing as her at this. And I went home every day and I got obsessed and I practiced and I practiced. And every week we would get to challenge, if you wanted to, the person in front of you. So I kept challenging and moving up, challenging and moving up, challenging, moving. And I found it extremely rewarding. That, you mean to tell me that if I'm here in life and I see someone that's doing something amazing and I'm inspired by it and I go home and I work hard at it, that I could also accomplish that? And it started to click for me. And I remember the day that I challenged Kui, and she was nervous and I was excited. and we played our tunes and the music instructor was listening and he said, Mr. Crapo, and he said, play him again. So we did it again. And he said, Miesha, move up. And then I sat in the first chair. And that was an amazing feeling.
Wow.
So I don't even know if it was just resigned to sports, but I just had that drive when I saw someone else doing something great and amazing. It was inspiring to me.
Yeah.
And so I remember that now that you have me dial it back, I would say middle school.
Yeah. It's cool. I'm curious, like, in particular, to pick your brain, because I feel like the relationship to competitiveness is slightly different for boys and girls. Like, boys, outwardly, I think it's a bit more just like in-your-face competitiveness, like the top dog, the cock of the yard, the star football player. Like, where girls' competition can sometimes be, maybe even the messaging is like, it's not as socially acceptable to be like hyper competitive as a girl. You're supposed to like rein that in a little bit. And it's so curious how that was in you, not against opponents necessarily, not like Kui Kwam or Ronda Rousey one day, but the competition against yourself, to just be like, ooh, let's go and do this. And how interesting of a path that took you on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just gave me the confidence to know that hard work has reward at the end of it. And just the personal accomplishment, it really wasn't about beating Kui. It was that she was incredible. I was inspired. And then I worked hard and I competed against myself. Every day.
It's kind of like I competed in MMA too, but I never fought under the immense spectacle that you did with the hundreds of thousands of people watching main event and the pressure. But what I always felt, especially later on unpacking it, looking back, was it was almost never about the opponent, even in the fight. Even if you were fighting a Ronda Rousey or the guys that I fought, like still most of that battle was with yourself in the training, in the discipline, and even in right before the moments when they locked the cage and like, fight, are you ready? Fight, are you... Up until that point, it's all with yourself. And then there's this like flash of chaos and all of a sudden you're in a fist fight and it's crazy and it goes the way that it goes. And then you're back with yourself anyway, because you're either elated in the victory or you're, damn, what went wrong, and dealing with all of that stuff. So it's fighting is an interesting one. It's two people locked in a cage and they've got to face each other, but so much of it is still internal, right? Is that your relationship to it too?
Yes, you're so right. 99% of it is right here in your own head, and everything minus the 15 minutes that you're out there competing are all within yourself, where you've got a battle just to show up, just that walk out to the octagon.
It's crazy.
The music and the people, and then you get in there and you get locked in, and then you switch gears. But the gear that you switch into is all dependent on the mental work,
of course,
that you've done before, because people think that it's all the physical, what shape are you in, all that. If you gas or you don't gas, most of that's mental.
Yeah.
Because if you are redlining because you're stressing and you have too much anxiety and you don't know how to harness yourself, you gas.
Yeah.
You have an adrenaline dump, and that's up here.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough awareness, if you're not in the moment enough, if you're, too emotional, if you don't have a grip on yourself mentally to harness all the things that you need to be truly present and competitive in that moment in your best form, which is a very hard target to hit.
Yeah.
But then it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. It's a big game of composure, right? Really, it's a high pressure situation. You're going to see how calm, cool, and collected you can be under pressure.
Yes.
Because throughout your history, I'm sure, in numerous occasions, and I remember some from my memory, you've been an MMA fan forever, watched all of your fights, and it's like, you've been in some bad spots. Everybody's like, you know, they're doing this thing, and you get out and you're like, whoa, that's composure. You know, when did you notice it in your career that you maybe really had to work on this side of a game? Or was it something you always knew? Like you said, training in the physical, getting better at jiu-jitsu, getting better at hitting the mitts. When did you really say, like, oh, we need to work on this? And how did you work on this? Was it something you actually dedicated time to?
I think that this is something that came more naturally to me.
Yeah.
Fortunately. Not something that I think is reserved for people that come naturally. I think you can work on it. And there are certainly aspects of the mental game I've really had to work on. But calm under pressure is something that is more natural to me. I'm not a very reactive person. I tend to assess situations before I react to situations. And so that naturally translates well to high pressure problem solving, because if you are not reacting to the situation, you can observe the situation and think it through and problem solve.
Yeah.
Even when you're in such a high pressure situation that your thinking is more on autopilot than it is, you know, like you and I just being able to talk here and I can calmly formulate my thoughts. It's just a completely different problem solving game once you're right under that. You know, fists are flying at you, but if you can stay calm and work through situations, then I think it's beneficial. You know, people panic tap a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. What do you think, in hindsight, reflecting on your career, is the most high pressure situation you felt? Like, you felt the weight of the moment. Is there a moment that stands out?
I think the most high pressure moments, I mean, there's many of them, but anytime that you're fighting for that number one spot.
The belt, baby.
Yeah. Anytime you're fighting for the number one spot, because there's just something extra riding on that moment. It's just something that you've worked. I mean, for me, I feel like I had worked my whole life for.
Lifetime, yeah.
And so, and you so badly want to accomplish it. Now, the ironic part is that honestly was the downfall for me. That was the breaking point. That was the worst point. But it was a great learning experience. But I would say anytime you're fighting for the belt, but even, you know, as a number one contender, you know, you're clawing your way up there. Every moment has its place. Every moment has its purpose. And, you know, every moment is building you to get to that ultimate high pressure moment. But I think those title fights, you know, I fought Ronda especially because there was such a rivalry there.
Yes.
So it was one thing fighting Holly because she's just sweet.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really enjoy her.
Yeah.
I enjoy her social media. I enjoy her presence. I always cheer for her.
Someone you love, you know?
Yeah, it is. But it was also easy.
Yes.
You know, because it's like I don't associate punching with any like ill feelings towards her. It's like, you're giving me an opportunity, I'm giving you, thank you. You know, shake hands and let's do this.
Yeah, lovely.
But when there's the animosity, when there's somebody you really can't stand, and you know that, you know, there's so much of the crowd out there that wants to see this arrogant person go down, and you're like, I'm the only one that can do it.
You gotta say,
and then, right, and then you don't do it, and you're like, like it sucks, you know. But I think those moments were the hardest ones. I think fighting Sarah McMahon was a tough one too, because she was such a great wrestler, and on paper she had the strength, more of the strength than what had carried me through my career. So I think most people didn't think I should take that fight. Including a lot of people close to me were like, don't take that fight. And I was like, I have to take that fight.
Yeah.
Because what am I doing here if I'm not willing to fight the best and test myself against the best?
The scariest fights are probably the ones you should be pursuing, right? Not
right.
Trying to like Doug, that you love a challenge, clearly.
Yeah.
It's that, all right, bring it on.
Yeah.
When you get to come through the other side, that's even sweeter.
Yeah.
Speaking of sweet, your fight nickname was Cupcake.
Yeah.
Who gave you that? Where did it come from?
It kind of developed over time. So originally I was Takedown Tate.
Okay. Makes sense.
And, you know, having the wrestling background, you know, like there's all these knockout, you know, whatever. And I was one of the few girls, I can't think of very many girls that came from a wrestling background that were fighting at the time that I did. So it was kind of fitting. And then as I was just getting my start and I was starting to rise, so many people were underestimating me. And, you know, if you're the cupcake or the cookie on the team, it's like, it's not a compliment. And so I kept kind of hearing it, and it pissed me off. It made me real mad at the time, because I was just like, okay, so you think because I have my hair down and styled and I have lip gloss on and a skirt that I am not serious about the sport, that I can't fight. I can't do both. Is that what you're telling me? And I was like, okay, I'm going to show you what a cupcake is.
Let's go.
And so I started to embrace it at some point. I made that switch. Instead of saying I'm, letting this turn me bitter, I said, well, let me make me better.
Yeah, that's very cool. Talk me through, I love this tension. I've heard you talk about it before, and I want to dive into it and unpack it with you. This moment of elation when you win the belt, especially the way you did it. 5th round, Holly Holm, going out on your shield, rear naked choke in front of the world. Like, oh my God, I've worked my whole life for this. But then kind of the crash and the realization that came after that it maybe wasn't all it was cracked up to be. How do you think about that now? Like, what was it like in the moment? And then what transpired in the days and weeks after where you were kind of like, huh?
In the moment, it was the best feeling because I had bought in to the idea that becoming the best in the world and wrapping a shiny gold belt around my waist was going to fix all of my problems.
Made it.
Right? You made it. I'm successful. Like, yeah. I should be happy now, right? And it was great for a week, maybe 2. And then I had to sit back and address the fact that there were still all the skeletons in my closet, all the things that I was shoving under the water and, trying to hold the beach ball under the water, that it was still there. And I said, well, if that didn't fix all my problems and magically just make my life so much better and take away all my traumas and the things that I've refused to address and the little girl that I left back there and just forgot who I was, haven't worked on any personal development. I've just been a machine. I've done everything that I can to close off anything that causes me to think twice or address my feelings or address who I am, because that wasn't a part of the objective.
Yeah.
The objective was to win, and winning was to be successful, and to be successful was to solve. And when it didn't come full circle, that's really when things came crashing down for me.
Yeah. The breakdowns often lead to the breakthroughs. How long did it take for you to start to piece all of that together? And what do you do with a realization like that? Because it's kind of a lonely mountain to get to the top of, because now you've got the belt. By virtue of having the belt, now everybody's coming after you. Now you've got the target on your back, and you're wrestling with all of this stuff. Like, what started to happen thereafter when you realized it? Is that the moment? Would you say you fell out of love with fighting at that moment? Was your heart still in it, or did it take a longer time to transpire? What did it turn into?
I think that I had started to fall out of love with MMA before my title fight. I'd slowly started to decline a little bit at a time, but I hadn't fully broken until I won the belt. And that was a big cracking point for me. It was like somebody just dropped the egg on the floor and just shattered.
The illusion's over.
The illusion was over. I saw behind the curtain. And it was like in The Wizard of Oz, when all, everything and the Oz, and it's like, and they see behind that. I'm like, what?
Yeah, a weird little guy.
Yeah, right? For me, it was just realizing that it was nothing that I thought it was, but I had no answer to that. The only answer I could come up with was, well, maybe it's because I haven't defended the belt yet.
Nice. So I got to go back in. Just
I've got to fight again. Yeah. I've got to win. I've got to actually solidify that I'm a champion. Maybe that's what it is. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know how to do the work, because I didn't even know there was work to be done.
Yeah.
So, I was lost. I was absolutely lost. And then I broke, but I was still lost. And I had no idea where to go from there, except to try to do the only thing that had ever worked before as a pick-me-up, was to fight and win. And if I could fight and win, it would boost me temporarily. Mm-hmm. And then I would need to do it again because I would come down. And so I don't know, there wasn't any logic in it, but it was the only conclusion that I could draw at the time.
Yeah. There's a line from Gabor Mate where he says, you can never get enough of something that almost works. That sounds like a little bit of a cycle you're in, because it does. It gives you a focus, right? All this stuff you're feeling now, like, oh, these feelings are awkward. And actually, you know what we can do when we're in camp? Get rid of all the feelings. We can turn ourselves into a machine again. Maybe I've just got to defend the belt, and you go back in, and you got to go back in, and you go through, and you're like, oh no, that still wasn't it. So you have to keep going back enough times where you realize, like, oh, there's no more going back, because my answers aren't really here anymore. They're somewhere else. But it's hard. you've built a career. This is what you do. You're a fighter. You were the women's MMA champ. You and Ronda were pretty much primarily the cause of putting women's MMA like on the map. That rivalry and the main events, because it was a couple of years before Dana White was saying women will never fight in the UFC. A couple of years later, here you are fighting in the UFC, main event stuff.
Right.
Like you did it. You were a critical part of that story.
Thank
So your whole identity is wrapped up in it, right? And all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, what are we going to do now? Who's Miesha Tate without the fighting?
Right. I think that Gina and Cyborg put it on the map, to be fair. And I think that Ronda and I elevated it to a level where so many more people cared.
Yeah.
You know, we really took women's MMA because now it wasn't just fighting. There was a story.
Yeah.
For the first time, there was a story. There was a rivalry.
Yeah.
There was a competitiveness between two skilled women who would just fight it out. And, you know, I gave her a good run for her money, you know, so it was fun to watch, I think. And, you know, we were two Spitfires going out there. And I think that, you know, looking back on it, that moment in my career, I was so upset in that moment, you know, when I lost to Ronda. And I lost her twice, so, you know, one in Strikeforce. So I had just become the world champion, and then I lost my belt to her. And then that was the moment that Dana changed his mind and said, you know what? I think there's something here to women being in the UFC. Because like you said, prior to that, he was giving every interview was women will never be a part of UFC. But I remember thinking that he just hadn't had an opportunity to see me compete yet. And I think that came from wrestling, because I know how many guys' opinions and minds I was able to change by just showing up every day and working hard and just proving to them that women could do something that they just honestly didn't think women did or women would want to do or women were capable of doing. So changing their minds opened my eyes, or at least set my intentions and goals a little bit higher than I think I ever would have if I had never tested myself in wrestling.
Yeah.
Right. And realizing that I could change perception, because none of those guys wanted me on the wrestling team. And none of them thought I could do it, or I would do it, or that women should do it. And by the end of my senior year, I was winning the coaches award because, well, I couldn't say exactly why, but I mean, it's an award that, you know, embodies what it means to be a wrestler. Now, how cool is that? To this day, that is one of my biggest accomplishments. It's right up there with the UFC world title, because nobody was there to see that.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I would have had the courage, gumption, and pursuit when I was like hearing Dana, you know, just be so fired up for women's MMA and want to use every opportunity to show how great not only I am, but all of women's MMA.
Yes. Yeah. I know what it is now. It's crazy.
It is so crazy. Yeah, to see the things that women have done since then, it's just mind-blowing, because that wasn't a possibility then.
No, and in so many areas of our lives, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, you know, like, but what that does is it firstly, it lifts the floor and raises the ceiling at the same time. Like the skill level now of MMA is just so vast, because we've got kids starting now, right? They're starting this when they're 8 years old and they're learning jiu-jitsu and they're learning how to hit the mats. These youngsters coming in, it's completely transformed the sport. But it was because of trailblazers. You know, we've gone from the glory days of MMA for me was like the Chuck Liddells and the Randy Coutures and just bombing the overhand rights. But the skill level is so good now, and what it's turned into, and so many opportunities. And you must hear it all the time as well from especially young women, like, you're my inspiration, you're my hero. That's a pretty cool mark to leave on the world. Otherwise, like, this wasn't in many people's consciousness until that long ago, that a woman could even do that, because it just wasn't what they did. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, I'll show you. It is what we do, and we do it pretty good. You could do it just as good as the boys.
Yeah, and hence embracing the nickname, you know, Cupcake.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to roll with it.
And roll with it. So it starts to, we were talking at lunch before, and I was curious, were the awareness in your career started to come into like a more holistic frame? Like you mentioned before, you know, becoming aware of things like all of these feelings and stuff I haven't unpacked was just kind of in the way of the main goal, which is train like a machine, go out there, beat someone up, get the victory. And then you start recognizing these things. So now you've got to do something with that. But you also started to become aware of like how your body was working, little bits about nutrition. Where in your career did this stuff start to come online? When did you start to learn about things like food and your cycle and working with your body instead of against it? Because that's a whole different thing. That is definitely something the men don't need to think about half as much. I'll tell you that.
Yes, not half as much. I think for andropause to be equivalent to what women experience, the hormone shifts every month. It was like 125 years. So it would take you guys of like hormone decline to like experience like that sway of hormones. So no, I think that, most men wouldn't quite understand, but we don't understand either. And so I think what we have to do is have the conversation. So when you ask the question of when did I start to become aware, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. I mean, years and years and years. I was first diagnosed with hypothyroidism at age 19.
Wow.
And I was always very interested in nutrition. So I wanted to know, how many calories does an apple have and what vitamins does it have? And I enjoyed learning about that stuff. I was going to college. I hadn't picked a degree yet, but I would spend a lot of my time just studying food. And I started learning about glycemic index. And I was struggling with eating disorders at the time. So I think part of that for me was trying to understand food so that I could get away from such a volatile, toxic relationship with food and body image.
Where do you think that was coming from at the time? Was it like enculturated through media? And I mean, social media probably wasn't much of a thing, but like news media and celebrities from inside the home, school expectations?
I think there were two major factors. I think one, being raised in the 90s when the very skinny models were so skinny, and seeing my mom striving for thin and struggling herself to maintain thin as she, had more kids and just, food for her, like myself, I'll admit, is the comfort.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do drugs. I don't drink alcohol. I might have a glass of wine. It's becoming even more and more rare for me to even have a glass of wine. But I'm not somebody who's like using drugs medicinally. So I don't use that as a comfort. So food is a very easy one for me to be like, I enjoy food. I like food a lot.
Fan.
Yeah, big fan. But I have to use discipline a lot to not overconsume because it's just easy for me to do that. And especially after years and years and years and years of underfueling and deprivation.
Weight cuts and all of that.
For sure broken some things in the way that my system is supposed to interpret a healthy relationship with food by extreme deprivation and extreme underfueling. So 19 years old, I'm at the height of my eating disorder. I am struggling massively. I've left my family. I'm off in college. I'm not wrestling at the time, but wrestling was another big factor. Having to focus so much on weight.
On the weight, yeah.
On what the scale says as opposed to how do I feel. So that really set me in a stressful manner about managing my weight because there would constantly be weight check-ins and weight weigh-ins and weights that you have to make. But there was no education process on that. So when you don't understand something, you just follow what other people's advice are, which is just a bunch of other kids putting on
the best advice now.
Like putting on garbage bag suits and running around and cutting salt and starve yourself and don't eat lunch. None of us ate lunch on wrestling days. We all would skip lunch and we'd be hungry in the cafeteria and all the other kids are eating. So this warped relationship with weight and food was continuing to manifest itself. It had spun so out of control. And I truly didn't think that I was fat, but I was terrified of becoming fat. Mm-hmm. And so I would just overeat and then I would purge and then I would starve and then I would restrict and then I would overwork out. And it was just like, I was in this vicious cycle. And so I was trying to learn about nutrition. And I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism and I was like, well, I don't really want to take this medication. I don't like the idea of taking a pill anymore. So, Dr. Miesha was like, what can I do to nourish my body? So you get on Google and you're like, oh, okay, well, thyroid, iodine. I made that connection. So I started trying to eat more iodine-rich foods and I tried to just eat a better diet. And eventually I just swore off purging. I was like, I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm not doing it. I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm fucking done. I'm not doing it. And, when I love Dr. Gabor Mate, I love the fact that you brought him up. But when you don't have a better coping skill to put in place with something that you're taking out. So there was a comfort in this cycle. There was a love-hate relationship with overindulging and then purging. The miserable part, the purging part, is like it's so terrible that eventually I was like, you know what? If I can't have the self-control to stop eating when I'm full, then I'm going to suffer the consequences, whatever that looks like. And so I would go and spend hours on a treadmill or a bike in the gym. So I was disciplined enough to be like, okay, I've sworn this off, I'm going to stop. But I will now pick up a new maladaptive coping skill and put it in its place. And it wasn't helpful. It was, I don't even know if you could call it more healthy.
I see it's an attempt to make the solution like a more productive one, but it's still not addressing the root cause of why there's the tension there in the first place, right?
Yeah, and overworking out is not good for you either. No. You're still trying to find a way to underfuel. So as I kept going, eventually I actually did start to create a better environment and relationship with food and body image. I worked through it. It was really hard. I had a big breaking point, and I went home, and I just had to really self-evaluate. And I got to a point where there was no more binging and there was no more purging. Great. And I had started to fight. And I very much enjoyed this. My first fight I lost, though, and that was a pretty brutal one. I won the first round, and the second round I got my nose broken. And I was like, it's just blood everywhere. And I was just like, what am I doing? And then I had this moment when I was like on my knees and my elbows, and there was like blood pouring out of my nose because I didn't know. I'd never been kneed in the face. I'd been training for like a few weeks. Okay, there's like amateur rules were pro rules. Yes. There was nothing protecting us. We were on a reservation. I got $50.
Yeah.
For food.
I think that the only thing they said was like no heel hooks or something. It was like, but everything else was just for a game. It was the wild.
I don't even know if there was no heel hooks for my first fight, to be honest. I don't think there was anything. There was almost no holds barred.
And it's so different to go. And it sounds like you weren't even training for that long, but it's so different, the training room versus the fight. The intensity gets ratcheted up a lot. And when you have those moments, it's a classic meme of Dana White, right? So you want to be a fucking fighter? Like when you're on your hands and knees and you're like, okay.
Yes.
So that's a pretty rude entry into the sport.
Yes. And so I battled back from that through the second rounds, but ultimately my coaches didn't let me go back up for the third round. And so that's where that ended. But it was good actually because I was like, I have to do better than that. I didn't prepare for it properly. And that's the issue. I didn't know what she was doing. I had no idea. There's so much I don't know about the sport. I've only wrestled. That's it. So eventually it was like maybe a few months after my nose healed and I was like training again and I wanted to continue fighting. And then I started to try to eat healthier, but it was according to the food pyramid.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, we all know now that like
we flipped it now. It's in a much better direction now. We did the whole South Park thing where we turned it upside down.
Oh my gosh, but I was trying. But standard American idea of what healthy was, rice and chicken and broccoli and still, probably calorically underfeeding myself a lot of those times. And so I kept trying to learn about nutrition. I kept trying to do it better. Eventually I started eating things like avocados, but I also didn't have any idea about pesticides and the things that were invisible on our food. So that was not even on my radar. And what I really made a huge turn in that was when I got pregnant. I started to become obsessed with building the best baby that I could. Like it was my responsibility. And the only person that could do it for my daughter is me.
Yeah.
So I tried to eat according to the development of the baby. Eating DHA and like salmon eggs, salmon roe and things like that. When I was like, oh, the brain's developing now. Oh, her bones are developing now. Oh, this is developing now. And really trying to eat nutritionally to support the pregnancy. But then my eyes were so opened to so many of the things that I didn't know about what it truly constitutes to be healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a rabbit hole with lots of tunnels to go down. And so I've just, over the years, it's been like one, rabbit hole tunnel after another that kind of branches off and is building this beautiful root foundation system for this, what I'm trying to build, not just for myself, health-wise, but for my children, for their children's children. And, you know, I think I told you at lunch that I'm launching Apogee Boise.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an education campus where we're going to help kids love to learn. No more force testing, no more standardized tests, no testing, no forced memorization, no sidelining of families, none of that nonsense. And the fact that I have sovereignty over this campus, like we are going to focus on health and nutrition, because I truly believe, and I had this argument, a debate, a good Socratic debate with another parent, a couple parents actually, that have kids that were going to Apogee Henderson. So where my kids were going before I'm launching this campus. And, I was like, well, do we have to put such an emphasis on healthy food or talking about food or, these things? Because, and they were telling me like I had eating disorders. And I said, you know what? I had too. And I truly believe the reason that I had this is because I didn't know how to be healthy. I didn't have an answer for the things I wanted to accomplish. So therefore, I was completely misguided without information. So I just did what I thought could get the job done. So if I had known how to properly fuel and how to feel best and what electrolytes were and how to hydrate and dehydrate, which I learned later in my career, and it was so great. I never, again, eliminated electrolytes before a weight cut.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like I would concentrate them and drink more. This is still a big misconception.
It is.
In weight cutting, is that you need to remove or reduce electrolytes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that. Based on my experience, I have entirely removed. I'm talking about I was drinking distilled water.
Yeah.
72 hours before a fight.
That was the old the adage, right?
That was the old way.
Yeah, you cut the salt and you cut the sugar, then the distilled water, then
all the food.
Basically.
You quit eating.
Then you sweat it all out. That you're just like, and it's such a...
You shut down your digestive tract.
It's like an awful low vitality place to get yourself to basically almost die on the scale, to then fight within 12 or 24 hours of it. It's insanity.
It is insanity. And to think that we are going to perform our best doing that.
No.
So, I think going down the rabbit hole for me and then learning so many of the things that I didn't know, and what I think a big mindset shift for me was that if you give the body what it needs, it will give you what it needs. Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind. When I learned that, it was Coach Cal. So I was working with Coach Cal in Orange County, and just a brilliant genius of a man.
Yeah.
And he told me that one time, and I said, this is unlike anything I've ever heard. What do you mean I give my body more? What are you talking about? More calories, more salt,
more love, more nourishment,
more water, more love, more nourishment, more understanding, more grace. And you're telling me that that's going to produce better results? I've never done it that way. I've always restricted. I've always taken from my body and demanded that my body shows up.
Yeah.
And so once I started to rework this was after 2 kids. So again, we're going layers deeper now.
Yeah.
And starting to understand the things that I should avoid and the things that I should actually do, and giving myself grace and giving myself permission to listen to my body for the first time in my life. That was never a conversation I had before. And it was never something I was instructed to do, taught to do, or even wanted to do. It was like we do the opposite of listen to the body.
Yeah.
Because we have to show up and fight, and it's a hard thing to do. So we've got to make it was just kind of like this idea of making everything tough and hard.
Yeah. It was like so many people, and I was in it. Sounds like you were in it. You've got to come through it to get out the other side, right? Like, the relationship we had with our bodies was one of war. We were going to war with our own bodies. We were starving it, punishing it. When we were beat up and overtired, it's like, well, shut up. I'm dragging you through training. You'll feel good after a couple of warm-up rounds, and then starving yourself to make the weight, then going to do the fight. Then now you've got off for a little bit because you don't have a fight for a while. So now you binge and you gain all that weight. But it's just like a complete shit show. It's a shit show. You're treating this thing that you are carried in, your best friend for life. You're treating it like you're in an abusive relationship to it.
I love that you said that.
It's wild.
And I started to say this to you, is like, be your own best friend. That was my mentality shift. It was like, what does the voice in your head sound like?
So most people, not like they would talk to a best friend.
Right.
That you wouldn't be around any person that talked to you the way you usually talk to you in your own head. You'd be like, who's this bitch?
Right, exactly. That's exactly my point. And I was like, But my message to the world was like, start being a good friend to yourself.
Yes.
Start being good to yourself. That internal voice should be kind and curious and grace, giving grace and also motivation and push. That's great too. Grit.
Because that is self-love too.
Yeah.
Like, come on, you can do it. Let's go.
You can do it. And sometimes you have to overdo it.
You do.
To know what's too much.
Yeah.
Because if you always are like, I don't know, I don't feel like working out today, or I don't know, I think I'm kind of tired. It's like, sometimes you got to show up and quiet that voice and be like, okay, you're taking a little more space than you deserve. I'm capable. And that's one thing I don't like about some of the cycle syncing culture is that they pathologize the cycle. And I think we should acknowledge it. And I think we should try to understand it. I think far more research needs to be done on women because there is a massive difference between men and women hormonally. That much we know. And we know that there are two primary hormones that are present in women that have massive shifts every single month. So therefore, it may logically make sense that women operate generally different than men. Does that mean we don't work out? We don't lift weights? We're not capable? We can't work? No. But should we maybe show up differently or give grace if we need to show up differently on a different day? Because every single month we're preparing for pregnancy, whether we're looking for that or not.
Yeah.
Every month.
Yep.
It's expensive. It's expensive on our caloric needs, on our metabolic needs, on our emotional needs to go through this process. Women need, it has now been proven, women need 100 to 300 more calories every single day in the luteal phase. What diet have you ever seen? If you know one, tell me. Have you ever heard, of a dietitian or, it's not so very recently in the world that I'm entrothed in.
Yeah, you've got to be looking
I've heard about
too.
this.
Yeah, you got to be looking.
You got to be looking.
Yes.
Because there's not very many people that are saying this right now. And so if women are saying, well, I can't tell you how many women have said, like, God, it's not fair. Like, my husband can, like, eat dessert and this, that. And if I even look at it, I gain weight. Yeah. Right? You hear it all the time.
All the time.
It's like, well, because when you're not giving and I'm not saying you need to give a dessert, but I am saying that when you consistently deprive your body of what it needs, if you're like, well, I have to stick to a 1,200 calorie diet, and that's how I have to lose weight, and I have to work out, and then you don't understand that you're burning more than that. So you're going into such a massive deficit that you are beginning to shut down your hormonal system, your endocrine system, which I've experienced, amenorrhea, more than a few times, and it's a horrible process. So your body wants to preserve your ability to procreate. That's a basic health function. And if you were so catastrophically dipping into deprivation where you are going to start affecting that, your body begins to play warfare on you. And so then you want food so bad, it's like ravenous is the word. And so you almost can't stop yourself. It is almost not I would not even define it as discipline at that point, because it's more than that. It's survival. And so when women consistently underfuel and consistently think that if they don't stick to that same thing that can work for men, a consistency, we hurt ourselves. And, Dr. Gabor Mate, a statistic that I learned from him, 80% of autoimmune diseases exist in women.
Yes, that's right. They do. Overwhelming. And like 3 in 4 cases of burnout is in women. It's all of this that you're saying. Like you said, it's a very expensive thing to go through this fertility cycle every month. And it's even more expensive. It's even more expensive if you're blind to the cost of it. And this is the problem. Right. It's like a hidden cost for most people. They know they're going through this. They have no answers for how to modulate the behaviors and the dietary intake and what they might need at a certain time of year. I had Dr. Kayla Osterhoff on the show, and she's deep in this research. And she basically said, a woman is 4 distinct humans every 30 days, basically. Like every 28-day cycle, she is 4 different humans throughout that and shifting gradually every day throughout that. And nobody knows. So you get in these spaces and you're using your voice here to really shine some light on these issues. But again, unless you're actually digging in the weeds, you're not going to find this in your generic, front page of the newspaper advice.
Health magazine.
No. Because we were talking over lunch, right? Like women's health right now, thankfully, something is happening here. There's at least a push. There's at least voices. There's at least an ask for this. But women's health up until very recently didn't really exist because it was men's health applied to women. Basically, like, let's study men. They're easier to figure out. They're cheaper to understand. So let's do all the research on men and basically say, well, women that, like, we're kind of the same. They're just little men. So there you go. There's your rules too. But it's done a massive disservice to women in general, I think.
I think so too. And as I was mentioning, but just at lunch, that a lot of the studies that are done, at least in mice, will sterilize the female mice so that their estrous cycle doesn't skew the data. So although they're required to study females and the data is supposed to reflect females, it's not always accurate.
No.
Oftentimes not. And this isn't a knock on the scientists. It is really realizing we need separate grants and separate money to study men and women. Men show up consistently, so it is easier to isolate what the change is and why the change is happening.
Yeah.
In women, estrogen, primary hormone, first 2 weeks of cycle, progesterone, massive primary hormone, more of a influx of progesterone than estrogen. We hear about estrogen all the time, but I think progesterone has a bigger impact in the way that we change and the way that we feel. Even slowing down our smooth muscles, the way that we digest food. It's oftentimes why women experience bloat, right before their cycle and whatnot, because we're just massively peaked in progesterone, which is slowing down our digestive tracts. Good argument is that maybe medication could affect us differently during that time. We don't know that yet.
Right.
We don't know that yet. But I think the questions are being asked, and that's great. And we're getting somewhere with some research. Dr. Stacey Sims, I read the book, Women Are Not Small Men. I'm like...
Thank you.
Who would have thought? Yes.
That's great.
And the Period Brain by Dr. Sarah E. Hill. That was a really good book. And I think it's helpful for men to understand this too, because most men have women that they're navigating in their life.
Oh, couldn't agree more. This is why I've loved these conversations. I've had menopause experts, perimenopause, doctors, yourself right now, because like I also not only want to help people understand it because we have women who listen to the show, I live with a woman and I want to learn as much as I can to help her through it. And she's learning too. But like, that's the essence of a relationship, right? It's a team. I'm not going to be one of these guys. Then my wife is like in perimenopause going through all these changes. Like, I don't know. She's just very different. I guess this is what it is. No, like if we understand the complexity, we can modulate all of these things we're talking about. But until we understand the complexity, we're kind of shooting in the dark here. So I think it's cool that these conversations are being had. And to a large degree, is it fair to say that this is the passion behind how you're using your voice most now with the podcast and things like that, to just go deeper on these topics?
Absolutely. So my podcast, Built for Growth, is now shifted more so to women's optimization, performance, and hormones and health, because I just realized how many women don't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm a professional athlete. My body's been in my business my whole life.
You're supposed to have the creme de la creme of advice, right?
My whole life. Yeah. And I did not know these things. And I worked so hard against the system, and I broke myself and I hurt myself. And if I can help other women to not go through what I went through, I would do that. And that's the goal. And I also think that this benefits men because, again, there are a lot of great husbands out there who lose good marriages around menopause because they don't know. And likely their wife doesn't know.
Exactly.
And when you don't know, how do you prepare for something? How do you navigate something? You'd be like stuck out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with no map.
Yeah.
How does that help? If somebody gave you a map and a compass, you'd probably be a hell of a lot better off, right?
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying is like, here's the map, here's the compass. Now everybody's going to be a little bit different. Every woman's going to be a little bit different. Every man's a little bit different. But there are a painting with a broad brush stroke. There is a lot of common denominators that majority of women are going to go through. That is like, this is okay if you are experiencing this. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you're not capable. The last thing that I want women to hear from me is that, luteal phase.
Yeah.
I'm just going to lay on the couch all day. I'm not capable right now. No, you're capable. But the way that you move through your day should probably look different.
Yeah.
You can still wake up and work out. You can still lift weights. You can still do all of that. But it's also okay if you may need something different that day.
Correct.
That you may not need during your follicular phase. Maybe that's the time that you schedule massage. Maybe that's the time that you ask your husband, honey, can you pick up the kids today from school? I just need a minute. I'm really overwhelmed. It can be that simple.
It can be that simple.
It can be that simple. And when men know how to show up for the women in their lives,
Correct.
most of them love to do it.
Yeah. Amen. But you've got to be able to pattern match it, right? You've got to have these conversations. You've got to be able to say that. To use a fighting analogy, I think it's fair to say that probably many women are like, they're fighting an invisible opponent. They're just like at the mercy of what's showing up that day, and like, oh yeah, and maybe they piece it together like, oh, I get really moody around my period or something. But that's about where the conversation ends. They don't understand these cycles. They're not taught. It's not their fault. But if you start to like this opponent mentality, like, oh, at this phase, they've got a really good jab, so I'm going to work my jab defense, whatever that looks like. It might mean asking for more help. At this phase, I always say, like, people are like, what's your favorite animal? I was like, my favorite animal is my wife ovulating. That's my favorite animal. But there's a different energy, right? Or there's a different energy there. So you know that if you can plan your days, maybe your weeks, your months a little bit with a bit more consideration around that nuance, it probably changes the game.
It changes the game. Yeah, and I truly believe that when a woman can communicate and a man can understand and receive, and this can be understood, like giving a compass and a map. The man shows up for the woman, provides a support and stability, and the woman shows up for the man in ways that help the relationship, in all the ways, because they feel validated, understood, and accepted, which I think is what most husbands are trying to do.
Correct.
Just don't. Correct. If they don't know, they don't know. Correct. And if she doesn't know, nobody knows. They're definitely all lost. Yeah, right? True. I mean, so I think it's so important that women do understand it is okay. Yeah. Men are probably not going to need as much of that. Men are going to have bad days, but likely over the course of 28 days, they're going to be far more consistent in the way that they can show up in their energy. And that's beautiful. I think that's God's design. Yeah. That's why the men are the structure to the house. Yeah. Right? And the women are like the water, the fluid, the life, they bring the life to the home, but they are not the structure to the home. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's a yin and a yang.
It's exactly what I was going to say. It's the whole thing I can see when you're saying that is the complementary opposites. Yeah. The black fish and the white fish in this beautiful dance. It's always just circling one another. Only if it's in order, though, only if it's balanced. And if the two fish, the white fish and the black fish, are all over each other and in chaos, then there is no order there. It's chaos. And that's not what we want for that happy, healthy relationship. You want this lovely balance between the two. There's got to be communication and understanding.
Yeah. So it's when I look back at it and I see all the things that I did wrong, I just want to shout it from the rooftops and just be like, you can do it better. Because here's the thing, is that most people over my career would look at me physically. And I'm not in the shape that I used to be in, and that doesn't bother me because I am healthy now. I'm healthy with the way that I view my body, the changes of my body. I'll just tell it on air. It's like I'm having another baby. So yeah, so I'm pregnant and my body's going to go through changes and I'm going to gain weight and I'm going to experience a body change. And that's okay. I work out, I move my body, I eat healthy, and I'm going to love myself through the process. I will not look like the Miesha Tate that fought Holly Holm for a world title today. And that's okay. Yeah. Because I'm going through another process in my life and I'm willing to give myself the grace in doing that. And I'm so blessed, I feel like, to be able to bring our third child, into, but it's not without, deep, I'm going to say some deep pain and deep regret in a way. There's not that many things that I regret, but I wish that if I had known the things that I know now, there would have been things that were different, done differently in my life. Yeah. And earlier this year, I experienced my first pregnancy loss. And that was rough. And I could never have understood that process or empathized in the way that I do now, having experienced it. So my heart really feels for people who have lost pregnancies or people who haven't had children yet and have lost multiple pregnancies. Yeah. And this is a real reality for so many women. And I truly believe that there is something tied to the way that we are fueling our bodies. I believe that in the core of my being. I think that me shutting my body down hormonally and experiencing another case of amenorrhea, even knowing better. And I knew better, and I still chose to go through with it because I had signed on the dotted line and I'm a professional. So I still showed up for that very last fight that I had, even though I was like, oh no. When my period didn't start, and for weeks, I was like,
we're here again.
This is bad. I was like, I know what this means for the next year of my life.
Damn. Yeah.
And I was like, I'm in too deep and I can't just not show up. It's too late. I miscalculated. I thought coming off of surgery and, my knee surgery, and I didn't calculate it right about like the calorie deficit and how long I would have to do that. And no, it hurt me. So we wanted to have a baby sooner, and we tried for 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
And I didn't get pregnant. And that was...
It's hard.
Yes, it was humbling. It was humbling because I had never had that experience. With my first two, I think I was still young enough. The damage hadn't accumulated as much. Yes, I had pushed myself, yes, but I was still able to conceive, drop the hat.
Get away with a little bit more.
I got away with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it came back around to really slap me upside the head and say, you are not fueling your body right. You're not taking care of your body. You are depriving. And now you're in your 30s, your mid-30s, your late 30s, and you're still pushing your body to the brink. Even trying to do it better, I still failed that time. And so we didn't get pregnant, and then we did conceive. And, we were overjoyed, and the baby lost a heartbeat at 8.2 weeks.
Damn.
So, it was like the biggest gut punch, but it also woke me up to the fact that I had neglected still. I had neglected myself. I try, I was trying to eat healthy. I was trying to do things right. But hormonally, there were things that were still, catastrophically wrong from, the extreme weight cuts and the extreme calorie deficits. So, and it doesn't always just have to be a calorie deficit. Sometimes it's chronic stress.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's eating pesticide-laden foods, that are causing your hormones to go crazy. Sometimes it's just like, I'm sure never just one thing, but I think that these are things that really contribute. Consistently women don't get enough protein, generally speaking.
Yeah.
They're not getting enough nutrients to support the endocrine system. In order for your body to make a whole human being, that's a lot of calcium. That's a lot of iron. That's a lot of manganese. That's a lot of DHA. That's a lot of all the things. Not only having the baby, but recovering from an injury and then producing milk to sustain a baby. Your body is, I think, kind of calculating that ahead of time. And just, if you're not there, if you're not supported nutritionally and calorically, how can you expect the body to show up in those ways?
Right? It's infinitely intelligent, the body. And I think something you said a little bit earlier, it kind of describes the tension of all humans in our culture that I think is particularly hard for women sometimes. And you said something on the lines of like, you had to push past your own intuition because you'd signed on the dotted line. And I think the most expensive decisions in our lives come when we let our heads talk us into something our guts was trying to talk us out of. Like,
so true.
And we have to pay the bill one day, and it's going to come in usually a not so nice packet, right?
And I knew it, and I was kicking myself, but I just felt like I didn't have another choice. So I did it anyways.
Hello, friends. I have a really quick favor to ask. We are honored that you are listening to this show, and I hope you're enjoying it, but we can make it even better with your help. If you like, subscribe, and share Radical Health Radio, we promise to make it even more radical. Your support means the world. Let's get back to it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, though, because like in the craziest way, there's a gift in that, because here you are now on the other side of it, kind of unpacking it and saying like, hey, I'm going to use my own example here to try and give you a story as to say like these are the consequences of when you do that, when you betray your own intuition. It might not always look like mine, but now let me reverse engineer that, kind of alchemize it and kind of give it back to say like, here are some of the things you do need to consider. And the reason I said I think it's sometimes probably more difficult for women in our culture, it's because this whole thing, life itself, I think is a lot of humans betraying their intuition for what the head needs, because we've got to pay bills and we've got to work. And we talked about like the Monday through Friday, 40-hour work week grind. That's not very well considerate of a woman's cycle to build the workspace in that way, but it's what we've got to do. And you do that, and then you're seeking convenient packaged foods, and then you're stressed out and you don't have good healthy coping mechanisms for that stress. So maybe you do start to have a glass of wine a night, and maybe it's two, and now your sleep is tanked, and now you're having an extra few coffees in the day.
It's
Now
sugar. You're leaning towards to like pick you up in that midday slump. You know?
Innocent little micro moments that over the course of days, weeks, and months and years turn into like just a burden, I think. A burden that is too much for the body to hold, that might result in a lost pregnancy or a breakdown or a lost period. Oh, God knows what else, you know, but we got to pay attention. You know, the Paul Chek used to say that the pain teacher, we would call something like this the pain teacher, because all painful lessons come with some fundamental wisdom too. The wound has a wisdom to it as well. But the pain teacher starts at first with like just a little subtle knock at the door.
Right.
And here, but you're like, oh, shut up, go away. That's inconvenient. Ignore the feelings, follow the plan. Then it's a little bit louder, boom, boom, boom. And if you continue ignoring it, eventually it has to kick the door down, grab you by your shoulders, sit you in the chair and say, well, now you're going to pay attention. And it's like,
right.
Okay, now we got to get some changes.
And I think here's the kicker is that I think that testosterone does a little bit better at physically handling those kinds of stress. I don't recommend that for men or for women. But it seems like the male consistency and the primary hormone of a male can deal with a little bit more stress or cortisol and still, you know, hit the gym and blow it off and go and like get through it. Progesterone, it doesn't work like that. Progesterone is a very stay home, nest and chill kind of hormone. So 2 weeks out of every month for us, it is a little bit harder to leave the house, a little bit harder to want to be social, a little bit harder to want to deal with stress. That's why we tend to fly off the handle, you know, and have a breakdown. It's more likely to happen, much more likely to happen in a luteal phase. We don't excuse behavior, of course. Like we all need to be accountable. Like apologize if you bite your husband's head off, please. But if your husband's aware and you're aware, you probably be like, oh yeah, you're starting your period in 2 days.
There's very freaking bit all the time. So I was like, oh, I'm sorry, babe. I'm very close to my period or whatever. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah, you don't have to take it so personal then.
No, exactly.
And she can just easily be accountable for it and move through it and try better. So you're right. The 40-hour work week, the consistency of that, the way that women, are expected to show up in the same way isn't the most conducive. And so when we go back to why do women have 80% of all autoimmune diseases? And what is an autoimmune disease? What does that mean? Well, the body is fighting the body, but the body is not recognizing self from self.
Mm-hmm.
So could it mean that your body is telling you one thing, your gut, your intuition, and your mind is telling you another, and you're choosing to go with what the mind says, and the body's screaming at you, no. And the mind is like, yes. And all of a sudden, you have war.
There's the war again.
There's the war because you are working so diligently against the way that your biology was set up to.
Yeah.
And so I think that even women who are like, well, you know what? I don't want to hear that. Like, I'm a CEO. I'm doing this. I'm doing all these things. Go ahead. But can you move through your day differently?
Yes.
That's it. Like, can you make space and time and grace to move through your day differently than, say, your husband or say than you used to before, or you're modeling after, what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
It's like, what can you do in real time to provide connection to self and listening to self? Because sometimes that's all you need is like to validate yourself or to just have a small change or 3 deep breaths. This doesn't add time.
Right.
It's nothing else extra on the to-do list. It's something that you acknowledge in the moment and you give yourself grace for it. You learn a coping skill that helps you move through the stress, and that brings the stress level down, even if nothing has physically changed about your to-do list or all the things you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you've brought your awareness here, and you've brought your stress then because of that here. The way that you are interpreting your day can change.
Yeah.
And I think that is the messaging for women who are still going to go out and do both and try to do it all. It's like, how do we implement those skills that are going to help you, support you hormonally more than, just pushing through and driving and under fueling and trying to do everything in a hyper stressed manner.
Well, this is very cool because you've clearly had to go through it yourself to talk about it the way you're talking about it. But not that long ago, we were in this moment of your story where you're kind of, the afterglow of winning the belt has kind of faded away and you've got all of this stuff coming up and you don't know what to do with it. Fill in the gaps between then and now in terms of how you come to understand these things. Did you go to therapy? Did you start a mindfulness practice? You've clearly always been keyed into these things. What do you think have been some of the biggest needle movers to actually get you to a place where you was able to move through all of that and actually bring it, grounded these days and like actionable into something that you can even tell other people, hey, actually, these are the things we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. There are a series of things. And the first thing I did was ask myself questions and say a prayer. Those are the first two things. I didn't have answers to the reasons why I felt the way that I felt, but at least I was acknowledging that I should be asking why.
Curiosity. That's good.
Curiosity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like trying to come up with the questions because I had been so good at not asking them.
Yeah.
Ignoring. So truly asking myself, why do I feel the way that I feel? That's uncomfortable.
This is a very interesting question when you
Yes.
first ask.
When you
You're
first
like,
asked.
oh shit, I don't really know
Yeah,
what's
I don't
going
know.
on here.
I don't know. Yeah. And but by asking the question, it gave me permission to start diving into potential answers and seeking, which I consider as like sort of soul searching. So to really trying to find myself in that moment. And then I think for me, something else that was very powerful was leaning on spirituality in a moment when I feel like no person, I was not accessible for any person to help me in my darkest moments. I was alone. The moments that I contemplated if my life was worth living, there was nobody there. I had isolated myself from everybody. I had been a soldier. I had been so disciplined. And to many looking at me, the pillar of strength. She's such a strong woman, but inside I was just crumbling. I was broken and I was weak and I was fragile and I was scared and I was clueless. I had just driven all of that as far down as possible and not addressed it. So I think asking myself and starting to allow those emotions to have some space, to have some time in the limelight. And that is a heavy lift.
Yeah.
That's hard to work through.
Yeah.
But it was worthwhile. And then that prayer, even though the first time that I said it, I didn't feel like I was worthy of an answer or worthy of, God or worthy of any of that. But I just made the attempt and I feel like God did show up for me in the ways that mattered. He started to help me find the answers and guide me through what and where I needed to go in order to get to the other side of this. And I think once I started to do that, I started to reconnect with relationships and family members who I hadn't talked to in years. So reconnection was really big for me, reaching out to long lost friends and family and some even great aunts and uncles of my grandmothers that I had never sat down with and really had a conversation. I called them up, they're in their 80s. Can we have lunch? Can you tell me more about my grandma? Just tell me funny stories. And we laughed and
cool.
The old days. And my grandma was 3 years old when she came from Switzerland on a big boat. She didn't speak English, so what was it like? Tell me more. My grandma was a great storyteller. I loved her, but she was, at that time she had already passed. And so her younger brothers and sisters, it was so fun to go back and just talk with them and reconnect. And then I started seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist. So one thing I recommend is that you find a therapist that is actually going to provide you with skills of how to move through.
Correct.
This is why I'm not a big fan of talk therapy.
Yeah.
Because it is a repetitive opening of the wound. This is not to say that it's unimportant to be able to talk about how you feel. You do, but you don't have to say it over and over every single week and relive the trauma of that. It's like, okay, now I know what my issue is because I'm asking the questions. So now how do I move through that? What's the new skill set that I need?
Yeah.
You know, like when I talked about the eating disorder and I was like, well, I traded that maladaptive coping skill for another maladaptive coping skill. Tell me what I can trade this maladaptive coping skill for something better and healthy that's productive, that's going to help me. That's where the professionals come in. And I've read all of Dr. Gabor Mate's books.
He's the best there.
Oh my gosh. That man.
On the pod, Miesha.
Get him on. Would love to.
He's the best.
Yes, I'm sending it out right now into the universe. Help me connect with him. No, he's so great. I honestly think that I would be a bit starstruck if I had Dr. Gabor Mate on my podcast because I'm just such a big fan of his work.
Yeah.
And I love what he does. I loved the book, Hold On to Your Kids.
Yeah, big one.
I loved his book, When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
Just, you know, and that's when I started to learn about the pathologizing of like the autoimmune disease and how it could be a war with self. We just don't think about that. We think, oh, we just have this and we shut off communication with the body through medication. But I sure want to tell you something.
Yeah, of course. Right?
I used to have eczema. I used to have it really bad on the inside of my wrist and then on tops of my hands, and it would break out. And I was in a really toxic relationship for like 9 years, and it would break out and flare up all the time. And when I got out of that relationship and I started soul searching, even though there was stress and, you know, pain and a lot that I had to unpack with that, I haven't had it since. How wild is that? Like, what are we talking about right now? Why? That's crazy. That is mind-blowing to me.
It is. They say the issues are in the tissues, right? In so many ways. I've heard countless incredible stories just in this role of podcasting. You know, I had this disease, and I left a toxic environment and I never even thought about it again. It was manifesting because of a tension, because of
what was it?
A strained relationship. I'm just showing a random example. I mean, I've had personal clients with back pain, for example, and you can take them through all the movement assessments and be like, something logically isn't adding up here because it doesn't seem to be anything that's causing the back pain. Wait a minute. Maybe this is like psychosomatic. What's going on with the feelings of the weight that you're carrying in life right now and supporting your family, for example, and we get into something and there's a big release and you know what, that back pain's kind of not thinking about it so much anymore because it was an emotional pain. It's the same thing as an autoimmune disease in many ways. Like the body would only attack the body if it was in a completely confused upside down wall-like state. Healthy bodies don't attack the healthy body. It's in harmony, right? There's no dis-ease.
Right.
And I think this is the next evolution of the conversation around health, right? Yeah, of course, you have to think about all of the stuff. There's a lot of stuff to think about. The quality of your water, the quality of your food, how you get in your micronutrients, understanding your cycle. But then this whole other thing about emotions and communication and light diet and searching your feelings and learning and being of service. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
There's so much to it.
There's so much to it. And then I think that the cognitive behavioral therapist, that helped me a lot. So finding a really good therapist to help you put new skills in place. Because what I've learned as a human, we don't just get to drop something.
Yeah.
There's a pie and it's meant to be full.
Yeah.
So if you're an alcoholic and you just think that you're just going to stop drinking, you may relapse a few times. That's what I found, like when I tried to just stop having my eating disorder. You know, it wasn't until I could put something else in its place, which mine wasn't much healthier.
Yeah.
But like, if you want to change a habit, I believe that we do it best as humans if we put a new one in its place.
Agreed. Yeah.
So that was kind of an epiphany moment for me that I learned also through cognitive behavioral therapy is like, well, what can I replace it with?
Yeah.
How can I still feel complete?
Yeah.
And so learning the skills to go along with that. And then I think also, you know, my kids are just a big driver and my ceiling is their floor.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to try every day.
I have to try.
I have to try.
They're really good at, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, helping you find your why, you know, just that idea. I've said it a million times on the show. It's something I fully believe. The best gift you can give to your children is to work on yourself earnestly, honestly, holistically. When I say work on yourself, I don't just mean be a jacked mom or dad, because you can sometimes do that as an unhealthy coping mechanism again.
Yes.
How many addictive tendencies that skewed over here into extreme exercise look better because it's better to be addicted to exercise than it is to be addicted to alcohol, but hasn't addressed like the fundamental tension that's maybe driving these things, right?
Yes.
But to work on yourself for your children, because you are imprinting on them. Every moment of every day, your nervous system is imprinting on them. The way that you get to show up, the way that you get to really use that beautiful, beautiful burden of like, we all come out of childhood with some stuff. We're kind of supposed to, I think.
I thought so too.
The game.
Right.
You know, it's like,
that's why it's no point in blaming parents because
not at all.
They're doing the best that they can with what they have, even if it doesn't look very good. It's like what they're capable of.
That's right.
And so you find a way to move through it and be better because of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do you think, maybe this is a strange question, but I think podcasting really helps me as a person because it forces me to stay curious. It forces me to verbalize things that are otherwise bouncing around in here. We were talking over lunch, sure, about 100 episodes now. And that's kind of like, it's like the barrier to entry of like, oh, it's real now. Like 100's a lot. A couple of years in the game of having these conversations. How much do you think the podcast itself has allowed you to learn and keep yourself accountable and keep showing up also for, let's just call them your other children, you know, your listeners, the people that are showing up to listen to what you're going through. It's a really interesting journey, I feel. So from one podcaster to another, what's it been like for you?
It is. And you know what? It reminds me of another skill because you asked me, you know, what are the things that I've done? And mindfulness and being truly present. I was an expert at none of that. I was an expert at all the opposite. I was the expert at disassociation. Don't be where you are. Be somewhere else. And it wasn't until, again, I started working with my cognitive behavioral therapist that I learned a skill of presence for the first time in my life.
Yeah, it's a skill.
It is a skill.
And it can be trained.
Yes, it can be trained because it wasn't me. I had never focused on being, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't grow up with a horrible household. It was not like a 10 out of 10 trauma, but my parents fought a lot. And, you know, it was a lot of times a place that I just didn't want to be because they were very angry at each other all the time. And it was dysregulating to me and my nervous system. So the way that I dealt with it was like trying not to be present.
Yeah.
So I got really good at that. And then it worked well. It served me well in fighting because I could just not be present in all the things, go through all the motions, put the wiring in, and then just go and
execute,
do the fight.
Yeah.
And then base all my value on that, you know? So being mindful, some of the practices that I would do is having a mindful meal. So that looks like sitting down with your food, preparing your food, looking at your food. Really look at it. Notice the colors on the plate. Notice the different things on the plate. Then when you're eating the food, really try to taste the food.
Yeah.
Try to pick out all the different flavors that you can and the different textures. For one, it makes meals so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Slows down so your stomach can actually do what it's meant to, set up and salivate and digest and all those things. You know, you're not just throwing food in your mouth, not being, you know, intentional.
Yeah, I can be very good at that.
And like mindful showers. So, you know, just trying to go in. Micah, my CBT, cognitive behavioral therapist, gave me a practice. This was one that I first started with was the balloon analogy. So it's like you think of it like you're holding onto this balloon. And the moment that you lose focus on exactly here and now, which is like your five senses, what are you smelling? What are you tasting? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? And what are you hearing? As soon as you start to think about something else, it's like you've let go of the balloon and the balloon's starting to float away. So you try to bring the balloon back and you hold it. No, the purpose of this is not to hold the balloon indefinitely. The purpose is actually to notice when you've let go of the balloon. That's the driver in it because the human brain is going to wander.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter how many times. The more times, probably the better, because then you get to cue in. Oh, I've lost my presence again. I'm thinking of something that's in the past or the future, something I've got to do or something that I've done. I'm not right here in this moment.
Which paradoxically is the immediate moment you come back to the moment is when you realize you're not in it because you're like, oh, if I wasn't here, where was I? Oh, now I'm here. And then you get to try and stay and percolate a little bit longer.
And that is one of the beautiful things about doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Is that it helps you for an extended period of time have that practice because
I've got to be here.
I've got to be here because if I start thinking about my laundry list of to-do things or the content I've got to create or this or that, then I'm like, what did you just say?
Yeah, like, oh shit, what was your question? And you're just like, oh yes, anyway.
Yeah. So it's just like being where your feet are. Yeah. It's a skill. And that's a couple of ways that I began practicing it. Oh, and I also he gave me a packet of stickers.
Yeah.
And I would stick them around in random places in my house, on my steering wheel, this and that. And those were mindful moments.
Little cues.
Little cues like, let's be mindful for a second and check in with how am I feeling. Let's ask the quick question. How am I? Quick rate. You can do a scale of 1 to 10, or you could just say like, am I good? Where am I at? Like, how's the day feel? I'm a little tired. Okay. I'll give myself a little grace then. That's all right. Like, I can still do my day, but I'll give myself a little grace.
Yeah.
But if you don't check in, if you completely ignore, if you're completely oblivious, if you're never mindful, if you're never where your feet are, it's really hard to do these things. It's very easy to get dysregulated. It's very easy to shove food that you didn't mean to down your throat because you're not being intentional about anything that you do. So I think adding some intention through building those skills was a big game changer for me. And I think it made me better at sitting and doing interviews.
Yeah.
Whether I'm being interviewed or whether I'm doing the interview, because that is a mindful skill.
Well, I've often said that I can't think yet of any situation where a little more presence isn't profoundly impactful. Whether that's in a very trying moment, maybe you're in a heated disagreement with somebody. If you can stay a little more present with what's alive, you're going to be able to communicate your ideas a little bit clearer without getting defensive or, God forbid, lashing out and saying something mean that you instantly regret. Mm-hmm. When you're in a special moment with the people that you love, if you're a little bit more present, that's just mind-blowingly beautiful at this moment. When you're watching a sunset, and instead of just going like, oh, that's cool, let me take a picture, if you really watch it and you sink into it, it's special. So I think just that little micro moment to ask yourself those little reminders. Am I where my feet are at right now? Oh, no. I've been living in my head spiraling about this thing for the last 20 minutes. Can I just come here now? Can I take a couple of breaths? Can I get 1% more present? That's all I need to do. And I just do that thousands of times a day because life is practice. You know this. It is a skill. And the more you do that, and it's going to suck at first because you're going to realize by going on a mindfulness journey, you're going to realize how your mind is basically just full of crap.
All the time.
That's the purity of that moment, that word, mindfulness. Oh, yeah, my mind is full of nonsense. It's not full of, paradoxically, what is empty. Because presence is just empty. It's pure. It's love. It's awesome. And I think that's probably the battle of our time, honestly.
That is the battle of our
time. So much to do and so much
many distractions,
so much to think about.
Constantly. It breaks my heart sometimes when my kids are like constantly in every moment, like, take a picture of this. Mom, take a picture of me doing this. Take a picture. Like, they're doing something special. Take a picture. And I'm like, sometimes I have to be like, the more and more I've thought about it, I'm like, no, honey, we're just going to live in this
just
moment.
For the moment.
Yeah. I was like, not everything needs a picture. Sometimes taking the picture steals from the moment. But I realized that I have begun to imprint on them because we oftentimes want to capture every moment. And, like so many of those moments, we don't even go back and revisit. When you're at a concert, why are you taking video? You're never going to watch that again. I'm not saying that you won't enjoy pictures of your kids or special people or that you should never capture a moment on a photo. But we are just so much living through the box in front of our face that sometimes we forget to truly be present in that moment. And that's honestly where the real beauty is at.
Yeah.
Is watching the sunset, not through a lens, but through your own eyes.
It's funny that you mentioned the concert because it was something that a artist that I like a lot called Trevor Hall said at a concert about this exact thing that kind of broke my brain in the best possible way. He's playing his music and he starts a song and then he just kind of stopped and he's a bit of a hippie. He's like, guys, look, I love you all, man, but put away the phones. Like, just enjoy the song. And he's like, we're out here too busy trying to remember this moment that we forget to experience it at all. Like, we're living psycho. Yeah, it was so good. And I was like, and then it was shortly thereafter I went on a trip and I was in Indonesia. And this was still ringing in my head, that exact thing he was saying, like living vicariously through the screens instead of just being with it. And I was on this beach and I was watching this amazing sunset. And the instant, that feeling of like, oh, I should take a picture of this and show it off to the world. And then I didn't. I was like, no, this one's just for me. But then I looked around at the beach and 99% of people on the beach were all like this. And it's a tension because I'm like, I get it. Maybe this is the last night there and they really do want to remember this. But wouldn't it maybe even be more of a special memory if you didn't use the phone and you just fully took all of that in and you weren't so busy trying to remember it that you actually experienced it? And I think that's a powerful reminder. And we're all I think we're all pretty guilty of it these days.
So guilty.
Especially if we do content.
We all
So,
are.
this could be great content. And then I'm like, oh, I hate it.
All the time. It's a constant battle. But I think even just having the awareness, that's the whole point of all of this, is like the awareness of feelings, the awareness of presence, the awareness of mindfulness, the awareness of cycle, the awareness of how you're feeling. That is such a good place to start.
It is.
With just having the awareness. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect.
No.
But if we are aware of it, we can choose to make better choices, which I think lead to better quality of life. And that has kind of been my whole experience, is learning to live a little bit more that way, as guilty as I am of pulling my phone out way too much. Why do you think my kids are like asking me to take pictures all the time? Because I'm like, let's take a picture. I'm like, this is my fault. I'm always trying to capture this moment on a camera, but sometimes I need to just be there for the moment, because instead of trying to remember it through the camera and device remembering it, like, what if I could just put this one truly in my memory, and I'll always be able to go back.
That's it.
And remember
maybe
that
not
moment.
just even just in our memories, but like in our whole
Existence.
being, just like have it all there, because it is all there. Even it's in a strange way, even when we look at the picture that brings up the feelings and emotions that we experienced at that time, it's always here and now. That's the paradox of life. Like, everything that you've ever been through, everything that you will ever go through is here and now. Anything that you think of as a memory, you only experience in the here and now. The thing that you think is the future when you arrive there tomorrow will be here and now. So like, oh yeah, well, it's always here and now. We kind of all know this, but we live in a dissonance to it. And I think it's important to try and understand that. And the awareness is also knowing where we fall short of it. Not so we can beat ourselves up and say, oh, you fucking loser. No, because we can try and hopefully be better. Yeah. And nothing changes without awareness. So I think that's very well said. So what's cooking for you next, apart from a baby? You're cooking a baby right now. So that's pretty exciting. What's like on the horizon for Miesha? What are you excited about? What are you continuing to just wanting to pour your being into at this moment?
Well, my kids is a big one. And I think the podcast, because it is just a place where I can use my voice to hopefully help people for free and bring on experts. And hopefully something that I say can make a big difference in somebody's life. And that's the goal. That was probably the last thing I was going to say, is like, when I was going through the self-help journey, one of the things that was the most powerful and impactful was helping others. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very selfish thing to do, because it gives you back so much. So it is incredibly healing to help others. Yeah. So, do it for yourself, do it for others. But it's a good thing to do, all in all. And so I think for me, that was a big reason for starting my podcast. My coach, who was a mentor to me, passed away. He took his own life, and he was just an incredible human being, and I miss him tremendously. And I wish that there was more, if I could like go back and, have different conversations with him. But, sometimes people leave our lives too soon, and they leave the biggest impact. And that podcast was built off of losing my coach, someone who was so instrumental in my life and helped me get to a world title, and, knew truly the depths of the darkness of the relationship that I was in, and was just such a great buffer and just helped. He was a good person. And he said that change is inevitable, and growth is optional.
Amen to that. Yeah.
And it was so powerful. And I was like, a podcast has got to be built for growth, because we're all going to change. So do you want a choice in it? Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to say in it? Because you're going to have to work at it then. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing. That's where chapter 2 is working at that growth, trying to learn, having the conversations, because there's so much that I gain from every conversation I sit and I'm able to be where my feet are. There's something to take away from it. There's something that enriches my life. Everyone. If not many things. Everyone. And then starting this micro school, Apogee Boise is my opportunity to give back to the next generation, because I think there's a lot of things that our generation has done to set them back.
Yeah.
And, for generations and generations, I'm not the biggest fan of public school anymore. I've gone down the rabbit hole. This doesn't mean that there aren't great people that work in public school that want to help kids, but their hands are getting tied behind their backs left and right. They're not able to help the kids the way that they were before.
Yeah.
And I think that we need some good old-fashioned unschooling. I think kids need to love education again. I think they need to be facilitated with critical thinking and problem-solving skills. I think that they need to be asked more questions than told more answers.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Why do you think it could be? I want to know, like, what is creatively unique about you? What's your perspective? Like, why don't we offer that opportunity for more kids?
I don't remember ever really being asked those questions.
No, because that wasn't the design of public school. I mean, I know you've had Tim Kennedy on your show. I've had him on my podcast as well. And I think he does a really good job of talking about these things, but the lack of critical thinking that is fostered in public school may not be unintentional.
Yeah.
Most likely, if you look at where public school came from, the model, from Prussia losing a war and then thinking that, it's because too many people were thinking for themselves. So we need to find a system that gets everyone to conform. Brought to America, Rockefellers took it, turned it into public school education because why? Why do you think the Rockefellers would do that? Like, chew on it for a second. I could tell you why I think.
Yeah.
But you
I'll
think
tell you what
it
it's not, and it isn't for the flourishing of the human condition. That's what it's not.
Yeah, that's what it's not.
And objectively now, this is where it gets really interesting because it's failing. It's a failed experiment.
It is.
We all know what it kind of serves as today is basically daycare. So you can get more husbands and wives in the workplace to feed the beast, to feed the machine. But it is not, reading levels are down. The success metrics of people coming out of these institutions isn't good. The mental health cost of sending them to these institutions is not good. And there's no surprise to me that several of the biggest episodes we've done in this show, in our almost 200, have been all around the school topic. Because even parents that are sending the kids to public school and maybe had trying to convince themselves that it's okay, they feel that there's something wrong. And some people are this is where it gets really tricky because some people are in quite a bind. They need to work on all of this stuff. But I think this is the essence of good conversations like this and other options, micro schools, apogee schools, unschools, homeschool, co-ops, just mums pulling the kids out of school altogether. There's optionality now because we're getting to see how the sausage is made and we're starting to get a peek behind the curtain and go, wait a minute, this isn't working. So that is
homeschoolers statistically outperform public school educated kids on literally every single metric, including graduating from college higher. So, you're right. The system is failing, and I don't think it was ever the intention to truly help. I think it was down to dividing the nuclear family. When you read Dr. Gabor Mate's book about parental connection with children and how essential that is. It's called Hold On to Your Kids.
Yes.
Read it. It's so good.
For real.
It's so good. And you really understand about what happens when parents or a primary role model is not really present in a strong way in a child's life and how they get peer attachment.
Correct.
And peer attachment can be dangerous because then it's kids leading kids.
Yeah.
The blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
And they're full of, hormones and energy and often misguided if they don't have good role models.
Yeah.
They will take things into their own hands, and that's just usually not a good thing.
No, it's
Kids
not.
were not meant to survive without parents. And so, to take a child, I think public school education amounts to 7 years of time. 7, that's a lot of time.
It's a long time.
That's a lot of time.
The most precious years and all of those cliches too, so formative, so impactful. I feel very lucky, I feel blessed. And in many ways, like we've consciously constructed our lives in this way because we knew it was a hard boundary we wanted to hold. It. We don't want to give up that time with our family. And it's been wonderful so far. And I feel very passionate about this conversation. And I was so psyched when you said that over lunch because I had no idea that's what you were getting into next. And I was like, hell yeah, because I just think that this is another one of these big challenges of the future is we've got to look at what is not working. And instead of just being like, well, this sucks, we've got to actually just
improve on
we
it.
have to change it. This isn't coming from a top down. I don't think anybody is coming in and being like, oh yeah, the school system's broken, let's fix it. It's gonna be now through the free market of ideas and different options where parents can either continue to do that if they think it's fine, power to you. I'll say, yeah, you know what? I'm not jiving with this. Oh, but now there's a lot of options. Now we can think about it. So thanks for doing that. It's big.
Well, I appreciate that. It feels big. It feels bigger than me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm here for. You know, I've been so hyper focused on myself for a very long time in the sport. And now it is time to grow beyond that and be bigger than me and give to that future generation. And I think this is the best way that I can do it. So that's why I'm going for it.
Thank you for sharing this chat with me. This is so cool how so many people have been able to sit down with the people that I just used to like watch on TV one day. And now like life is such a trip, man. If you'd have told me 10 years ago, you'd be like, oh yeah, you'll interview Miesha Tate in a mansion in Malibu overlooking the hills, I'd have been like, what the fuck are you smoking?
Isn't that wild? I mean, if somebody at, you know, height of my eating disorder, the, you know, emotionally turbulent, toxic relationship, if somebody would have told me someday you are going to break down the barrier for women into the UFC, it's going to be your fight. And then you're going to go on to become the top 1%. You're going to be a world champion. I think I have 2 beautiful kids. And then you're going to, have another one. And then it is unfathomable. Mm-hmm. I could not have dreamt this. Mm-hmm. It's truly unreal, and life is unreal. And you just never know where it's going to take you. But I am a big believer in jumping before you know the net is there.
Yeah.
You have to. You have to jump. You have to go. You have to do. Because there is something extremely rewarding in figuring out how to do it wrong.
I love that you said jump before the net. That the net is there's a quote from Rumi where he says, leap, and then the net shall appear.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't.
It's that sometimes.
And that's also beautiful, and it's also good.
Did you at least have the courage to leap?
Was it Thomas Edison? Is it him that said, I know it was about the light bulb quote. Yes, it must have been him, because he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times before inventing a light bulb. I just figured out 1,000 ways it didn't work.
Yeah, there you go. Beautiful.
It's a reframe.
It's a reframe. Life is a lot of reframes.
A lot of reframes.
More than that.
So yeah.
So your story has been wild, and I anticipate that it is far from finished. So that's a good hub to leave people on. Where should they go to keep up?
Oh, you can follow me at Miesha Tate or at Apogee Boise. Most places, I think it's just my handles at Miesha Tate. I've got a great newsletter too that goes out every couple of weeks. It's mostly directed at women, but there's great information. Every few newsletters is definitely directed for my male audience, whether you're a coach or a trainer or father or a husband. If you have daughters, these things are still helpful, I think, for men to understand and navigate too. But women are really going to enjoy the things that I'm bringing. And I'm working on programs of not just showing up according to a calendar, because this is the part, again, I don't like about cyclical training. No calendar should dictate every day of how you feel, because every day is different. But how do we blend our intuition with what science and our calendar is telling us? How do we do it? Where do we start? How do women know how to do this? So like that tracking and the umbrella of intuitions and what they could possibly mean is like what I'm really trying to expand on. So the psychology along with, your cycle and along with the science, and really blending the two worlds.
Right on. Miesha Tate, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Woo. We'll see you all next week. Peace out.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Radical Health Radio. If you liked that episode, good news is we've got hundreds of others just like it, and YouTube thinks you would love this one in particular. So I think you should check it out. We'll see you next week.